The Alpha by Darren Stevens. Prologue. January 18th, 2028. Central Park, Atlanta, Georgia. Under the moonlit sky above and the heavy falling snow, Central Park and its surrounding trees seemed like glistening silvery blood veins feeding the dark heart of Atlanta. Clad in a custom-fit werewolf suit, the Alpha prowled as the city slept. This wasn't a costume, it was armor, the body-hugging, stretchable Kevlar suit, cloaked in pelt from ear-tip to tail, provided protection and fearsome allure. The amber-tinted goggles, engineered with a tapetum lucidum effect, made his eyes gleam like a predator. And when we looked closely at its paws, the steel sharp claws glinted attached to his fingers. The Alpha's transformation wasn't merely an appearance, it was a promise. When the moon ruled the sky, so did he. The goggles would give him superior night vision, and whenever anybody looked at him, it would appear to look as though his eyes reflected light at will. The Alpha's look was menacing, and it became even more terrifying when its jaws yawned wide, revealing razor-sharp teeth. Central Park lay in eerie silence. The snow-laden trees loomed like threatening sentinels. The world seemed mute, the silence only broken by the faint whisper of falling snow. On the park's far edge, a desperate man sulked through the shadows beneath the snow-draped pines. Perry Mathers, a gaunt figure in his late 20s, shuffled forward, his wrinkled, beige coat doing little to shield from the cold. His haunting gaze betrayed the weight of his thoughts, those of his latest victims. Several weeks earlier, he had fashioned a crude chemical bomb, stuffing it into a duffel bag and leaving it inside a locked theater with the unsuspecting theater audience. When the device released its toxic payload, its innocent victims created a scar on the city's soul. The snow swirled around the Alpha, a maddening vortex of white that obscured his vision. But his other senses compensated, his ears picking out the soft crunch of Perry's feet in the fresh powder, his nose tracking the faint scent of fear and sweat. The Alpha's paws left deep impressions in the snow, his strides long and effortless as he pursued Perry through the park. The cold air burned his lungs, but his heightened metabolism fueled his endurance. Elms and oaks, sentinels of Central Park, stood watch amidst the falling snow as the Alpha prowled the moonlit grounds, his paws whispering against the snow-kissed grass. The Alpha's ears, attuned to the symphony of the city, picked out the distant hum of traffic, and the forest-verdant canopy of melting snow above seemed to blur and fade, becoming a distant memory. The Alpha's focus narrowed to the vibrations that were from his moving prey. With each stride, the Alpha's powerful limbs propelled him through the park. The Alpha climbed with ease onto the roof of an abandoned warehouse at the edge of a park. The Alpha's claws dug into the snowy roof, his eyes scanning the landscape in front. His breath misted in the chill air, and there was a scent of pine mingled in the distant hum of traffic. With a fluid motion, the Alpha stood up, his fur ruffled by the wind. He surveyed his kingdom, the snow-covered rooftops stretching out before him like a vast, white empire. Perry's footsteps echoed through the alleys below, a desperate bid for escape. The Alpha's ears perked up, tracking the sound with ease. The Alpha could see the faint outline of Perry's figure, a small, fleeing shape in the distance. As the Alpha's gaze locked onto Perry's distant figure, a low, rumbling growl began to build in his chest. It started as a vibration, a tremor that shook his very frame, before erupting into a majestic, soul-shattering howl. The sound was primitive, a raw expression of hunger, longing, and triumph. It echoed through the snowy night air, a haunting melody that sent shivers down Perry's spine. The howl rose and fell in a series of mournful, undulating cries, each note piercing the darkness like a dagger. A repeated howl sent undulations of sound waves rippling through the air, visible as an acoustic pattern that transmitted through the snowflakes that fell and danced around the Alpha. He used these distinct patterns to hear vibrational sound from such long distances, deciphering and picking up vibrational echolocation information from the surroundings of his intended prey. The howl faded into the distance, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The hunt was on. The Alpha's snout and eyes looked up to the heavens, and then pointing its outstretched claw and nail towards the direction of Perry.
Hail, Odin, as you have sacrificed your eye in Mimmir's well, so I call upon thee for the sacrifice of industriousness.
The Alpha's low-pitched, gnarly voice sounding like a distant, convoluted rumble of thunder. The words hung in the air, a defiant invocation of the All-Father, the Norse god of war and wisdom. The Alpha's eyes blazed with a fierce, wolf-like intensity, his fur standing on end as he summoned the ancient power of the North. The Alpha's eyes glowed amber as he leaped from the rooftop, landing silently on the pavement. As he was running, his costume seemed to reflect as if a transformation had begun, the bones more agile, the muscles and tendons elongating, changing into animal-like movements, culminating with a unique, primal instinct emerging from its eyes. The Alpha surged forward, tirelessly crossing Central Park, which sloped downwards toward the top of a cobbled walkway, descending to the street level. The snow fell persistently, muffling the city's usual cacophony. Perry stumbled along the deserted road, his breath visible in the frigid air. The streetlights cast elongated, dark, and distorted shadows on the slush-covered ground, their feeble glow barely penetrating the swirling snowflakes that were falling on the ground. His footprints were fading, swallowed by the relentless white. Each step felt like a desperate plea for salvation. Perry glanced back, heart pounding. The Alpha was there, a silhouette against the distant skyline. Perry's thoughts raced like a hunted animal. Fear clung to him, icy tendrils winding around his heart. Each step through the snow-laden streets felt like a desperate plea for salvation. His mind replayed the news reports, the toxic fumes, the victims. Guilt gnawed at him, threatening to consume what little hope remained. As the Alpha's growls echoed behind him, Perry's breath hitched. He was trapped in a frozen maze, where justice wore a werewolf's guise and redemption seemed impossible. Abandoned cars lined the road, half buried under snowdrifts. Their windows stared like hollow eyes, witnesses to this nocturnal chase. Perry's fingers brushed icy metal as he pushed forward, the city streets closing in around him. The Alpha's growl echoed, a primal symphony. Its breath steamed, hot against the cold. Perry's legs burned, but he couldn't stop. He had glimpsed the Alpha's eyes, amber and unyielding. They promised retribution. Perry's hope waned. He knew he was trapped in this frozen maze where justice wore a werewolf's guise. The Fox Theater loomed ahead, its marquee flickering like a dying heartbeat. Perry's breath hitched as he stumbled toward it. There was yellow police tape wrapped around the building, walls, and the doors. The theater seemed abandoned. Perry reached out and tore the tape covering the door and entered. The theater looked resplendent, having showcased countless dramas, but none like this. A desperate man fleeing a werewolf-like creature in the dead of night. The Alpha closed in, moonlight casting eerie shadows on the snow. Perry's footsteps echoed through the deserted lobby. The air smelled of old velvet and forgotten dreams. He glanced around, seeking an escape. The theater's grandeur mocked him, a stage where fate played its cruelest scenes. The Alpha's growls reverberated, drawing nearer. Perry's mind raced,
Could he lose himself in the labyrinthine corridors of this dark theater? Or perhaps find refuge in the balcony where moonlight filtered through the stained glass? He pushed through heavy velvet curtains, entering the dimly lit auditorium. Rows of crimson seats stretched before him. He pushed through heavy velvet curtains, entering the dimly lit auditorium. Rows of crimson seats stretched before him, their emptiness echoing his isolation. The Alpha's presence loomed, a predator closing in. Perry's pulse thundered, a drumbeat of fear and desperation. As he climbed the stage steps, Perry glimpsed the ornate organ. Its pipes rose like skeletal fingers waiting for a maestro to summon haunting melodies. He realized that he could cause a distraction. He reached under the keyboard and pressed a button. This was to set off the pre-programmed melody. An eerie, slow chord started to resonate through the theater. The Alpha's growls faltered, confusion in its amber's eyes. Perry then bowed his head and headed left towards the corridor behind the organ, seeking the shadows and the darkness which could provide him an ideal hiding spot. The organ's notes swirled, filling the space with melancholy. The Alpha circled, torn between bloodlust and curiosity. Perry's mind raced. Could the music tame the beast within? Or was this futile symphony played for an audience of shadows? He scuttled along the dark corridor and then carried forward into the darkness, jogging and feeling his way on the side of the dark corridor wall. In the midst of running, his coat snagged onto some sort of protruding nail, ripping the coat, and the tip of the long nail scraped the inside of his right thigh. The nail tore skin and flesh, giving him a nasty wound. Perry let out a blood-curdling scream, which would either be his requiem or his salvation. The Alpha perked up, still only at the start of the auditorium, subsequently lunging towards the direction of the scream at the back of the organ, fur and fangs merging with the dim light. The organ music played faster, desperate chords that echoed his heart's plea. Perry was bleeding now, and he continued to run at the end of the corridor, proceeding towards the start of a grated metal spiral stairway. And then, a revelation. Just after the end of the spiral staircase, Perry spotted what seemed to be a secret lever, hiding beneath the last step of the spiral stairway. Perry reached out with outstretched hands towards the lever and pulled it. The stage trembled. Trapdoors opened. A network of tunnels appeared beneath the theater. Perry descended, the Alpha's howls fading above. In the labyrinth, Perry stumbled upon forgotten relics, a dancer's silk slipper, an actor's haunting wolf mask. Whispers clung to the walls, the theater's ghost urging him forward. Salvation lay ahead, but the Alpha was still in fast pursuit. As Perry ran, he wondered, was this leading to a way for escape, or was it a descent into madness? The tunnel twisted, their secrets unraveling, and somewhere behind him the Alpha followed, a malevolent creature of wrath and vengeance, its amber eyes aflame. All right, boys and girls, that was the prologue from the book The Alpha, written by Darren Stevens. I'm going to wish him the best of luck with this project. I had a good time reading it. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to hear more of this story. I, for one, am excited to explore more about this Alpha character and his phenomenal costume. Sort of like Batman, except for significantly more terrifying. As is, I'll put the contact information for the writer below. And again, I'd like to thank Darren Stevens for allowing me to read the prologue of The Alpha.